4 children if they would come sit down front. Yeah. I'd rather have them on the platform where you can see them, but my grandmother's not really able to do stairs. So,
go!
I like for my grandmother to sit in the first chair, my mother the second, my wife, and then my children. Also, this is not the extent of this, but I will take advantage of the moment to wish each of them Happy Mother's Day.
Go ahead.
2 Timothy chapter 1, and I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm just going to read the Message Bible because it says it in some ways and some things that make it a little more plain for us today. 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 1. I, Paul, am on special assignment for Christ, carrying out God's plan laid out in the message of life by Jesus. I write this to you, Timothy, the son I love so much. All the best from our God and Christ be yours. Every time I say your name in prayer, which is practically all the time, I thank God for you. The God I worship with my whole life in the tradition of my ancestors. I miss you a lot, especially when I remember that last tearful goodbye, and I look forward to a joy-packed reunion. Verse 5 is where I want to focus. He goes on to say, that precious memory triggers another. The memory of our last goodbye triggers another memory, and that memory is your honest faith, and what a rich faith it is. Yeah. When I think about you, Timothy, not only of our last time together and the tearful goodbye we had, but that makes me begin to think about, that reminds me of the faith that is in you. But when I think of the faith that is in you, I sat last night, and if you missed United last night, you missed the Antioch United service last night. You missed it. And I sat on this platform as my mother began to speak and share what the Lord had given her. It's kind of funny. The more I stop asking God for confirmations and words and whatever, the more I get them right. And I sat as she began to share last night what God had given her, knowing what I felt like God had given me for this Mother's Day service. Was amazed at God's ways. And he says in his letter to Timothy, Timothy, when I think of you, when I think of your faith, there's something else that I can't help but do. I think of the rich faith that is in you, But that then leads me to think of what was handed down from your grandmother Lois to your mother Eunice, and now to you. I'm moved, Timothy, by the faith that I see in you. But when I think of the faith that is in you, I am automatically caused to think of the faith that was in your grandmother, and then in your mother, and now is in you. The King James says the unfeigned faith. The word unfeigned means undissembled or sincere. The word undissembled means not pretended, undisguised. I see your faith that you live out, Timothy. I see your faith that is manifested in your life. I see your faith that people recognize and talk about. But when I see your faith, I automatically can't help but go back. Put that first picture up there if you would, please. I had an amazing experience 2 years ago. The lady on the screen and her sister were the teenagers who were out inviting people to church. I think they were out probably with adults in mind. But that day there was an unknown, at that point insignificant 14-year-old girl that nobody really knew about. Not very many people knew her name. And she just happened to get one of those invitations to come to church. And who knew? Who knew that from that 14-year-old girl, you can put the next one up there, there would be a church building that now stands in Gulfport, Mississippi, that 14-year-old and her husband would be an integral part of building. Not to mention, who knows how many lives impacted by the ministry of that 14-year-old girl who received something and then passed it on to her daughter, who is now my mother. When I stand before you today, and I appreciate the compliments that many of you have given me in many different settings and scenarios. I appreciate the compliments I receive from time to time on my preaching and on my teaching. I appreciate things that have been said about me throughout my ministry, about me as an individual, and all the lovely accolades that get said. But when I hear those things, it did not start with me. The unfeigned faith that is now in me. You got to go back to my grandmother, and you got to go to my mother, because what was in her was passed on, and what was hers then got passed on to me. So I don't stand before you today based on what I have alone, based on what I have come up with by myself, but it is the unfeigned faith that I have that started in my grandmother Lula and was passed on to my mother Alice and now resides within me. Hallelujah. Amen. Faith